Hi, and welcome to RAVE Leader Chat, week number 2 for the I Am series as we discuss the book by Jesse Middendorf, and as we, more importantly, uh, continue to think about who Jesus Christ is as he reveals himself in the I Am statements in the Gospel of John. So this week we will be looking, kind of tracing the outline of the chapter in the book, and then talking about a couple aspects of the verses that are referred to. But before we get there, I just want to first say thank you for your continued leadership. Thank you for diving into a study that's a little bit different. I know the conversation questions are different than in studies previous, but I think this is a great opportunity for us to dive in and to maybe come at things in a different way. Second, if you haven't already, if you could get your attendance in for the attendance tracking in for the session on the book of James, that would be very helpful to the session as we continue to try to track how well we are connecting to God, how well we are growing in our personal relationship or discipleship growth, and then to serve. And so trying to equip the session for that would be very helpful. And third, I just want to give you an early heads up that we are not doing the book completely in order. We are intentionally moving the I Am the Resurrection and the Life to Easter week, or to be our Easter passage. So we will continue to walk through them in biblical order and in order of the book through the 5th study, and then we will skip the 6th and move to the 7th and 8th. So let's sort of dive in. Again, we're sort of initially talking about the description in this book. The recap, he initially makes some claims, and the first 2 points are really somewhat summarized at the beginning of the discussion guide. One of the first big points that is made after an illustration about being in a cave with darkness is that he starts to help us understand the multifaceted meaning of light, and particularly God as light. Specifically, he says that it's significant, but when God says, "Let there be light," it's significant not only in God's power of creation, but also in revealing God's true nature or character. And so that really should help us understand that there's going to be multifacets of light discussion that takes place in this chapter. Then he moves on to sort of the unique call or role of chosen people in Scripture. Now, the chapter sort of just reduces this to the Israelites that are called to allow God to reveal his light through them. And it's a larger reminder that God's people are always blessed to be a blessing. It's never something that we hold on to ourselves. God shines his light on us. But if we remember Matthew chapter 5, Jesus also calls his followers light, the light of the world, that because he's the true light, we receive his light and we reflect his light. And so we need to sort of keep that in mind, that there's a unique call on the Israelites then, but also on God's chosen people today, and that is us. And so we are also called to do that. It's too easy to say, yeah, they failed at that, and moving right along. The light has been shown upon us, and we are to reflect that light. In Matthew chapter 5, the very beginning part is a good reminder right after the Beatitudes that Jesus calls his followers salt and light. We are not inherently light, but as his light shines in us, we reflect it to others. So then he moves on with what's really a pretty brief stop in the I am statement. I am the light of the world. And so I want to highlight a couple things. First is, as he does refer to a variety of verses, I am the light of the world points in a lot of different directions. It points to a lot of verses in the past. It points to John chapter 1, verse 1, that he is the light and the true light of all men, and that light gives life. It points back to the Old Testament, and he opens and closes the chapter with a reference to the Psalm and then Isaiah 60. But Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2 is a great passage for us to consider as well as we think about that. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who have dwelt in the deepest darkness, on them a light has shone. And what is that referring to? It's referring to the birth of Jesus Christ as Savior. So not only is there a wide array of light verses in the Old Testament, we could look at so many, and I encourage your group as those come to mind to bring those up. But light also has many different understandings. It is the struggle of good and evil, light and darkness. It is the struggle of understanding that we are in the darkness and then we are called to the light. It's also a metaphor for despair and hopelessness, and the darkness of despair and in the light of hope. So you just want to keep that open, that there's a multifaceted revelation going on here, that Jesus is uniquely the light of the world. The light that gives life, the light that brings hope, the light that gives understanding. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And the word became flesh and dwelt among us. So we need to be open to not being too reductionistic or simplistic in looking at this passage. And what's the claim? Jesus, again, that I am Jesus is ego eimi, I am, that Old Testament depiction of revelation of God in Exodus chapter 3. Jesus saying, I am, and part of what I am is I am the light of the world. I am the light that was at the beginning. I am the light that is shown upon those who dwell in deepest darkness. I am the light that brings truth and understanding. I am the light of the world. Now, want to kind of continue to keep up a little bit of some of the strategies we looked at last week. So one of the questions is, what are the verbs attached and the promises attached to this proclamation that I'm light of the world, and what's the context? So as we look at it, the verb that's attached is whoever follows. Jesus' revelations make a claim on us. And so bread of life really made a claim on us to come and to believe. And the light of the world calls us to follow. And so part of what's being intimated there is the same way that the people of God in the Old Testament followed a pillar of light during the evening and cloud by day. We are to follow. It's a clear call to discipleship. And so we need to understand that that is what the claim on us is. That's what God is asking us to do in response to the revelation that He is true light. But also look at the promise. Those that do follow will not walk in darkness. You won't be stumbling along. You won't be trying to be distraught by despair or lack of understanding. You will no longer be in darkness. You will have the light of life. The true course is set. You're able to see the things that need to be seen. You're able to follow the one that leads us home. And so that's an important discussion for us. And I really want to commend your group, really between sort of question 3 in the discussion guide and question 4, really unpack and dive and discuss verse 12. What does it mean? What do you hear? What ideas and Old Testament conceptions come to mind? And then it's also based on context. And the book does a pretty decent job of trying to let us understand that this was spoken during the end of the Feast of Tabernacles. And we know that because of John chapter 7, verse 37. It says, during the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. We know that's the feast that's taking place. And our author does a good job of trying to help us understand it. Let me offer one more quote that we might have a fuller understanding. And the picture that's attached to this email also has that in this video. But I think it gives us a little bit better understanding. Men of piety and good works danced through the night, holding burning torches in their hands, singing songs of praises. Levitical orchestra cut loose, and some sources attest this light went on every night in the Feast of Tabernacles, with the light from the temple and those 4 huge lamps that were lit that are referred to in the book. The light of the temple area shedding its glow over all Jerusalem. And it is in this context that Jesus declares to the people, I am the light of the world. So not only does the Feast of Tabernacles sort of speak toward part of this, but think about that imagery, the place that people understood God to uniquely dwell. During the Feast of Tabernacles, it lit up so bright that it gave light to the entire city of Jerusalem. It cast its light all over the place. And as they're looking at that light that comes from the representation of where they understood God to dwell. The Word who became flesh and dwelt among us. Says, I am really that. That points to me. That is who I am. I am the one who brings light to everything. And so it's a bold proclamation. Then it's an even bolder proclamation in Revelation at the very end in chapter 21, where there's no sun anymore because Jesus Christ is the light that shines so brightly. He is the light of the world. So then the book sort of segues pretty quickly, walks pretty abruptly past verse 12, and then moves on to the discussion in 13 to 29, and sort of the Pharisees struggling to see what Jesus is really talking about. Again, being trapped in a very literal perspective, and sort of stumbling over some of their expectations about how can we take Jesus' words as true without this substantiation. And then there's a segue to chapter 9. So skipping over the rest of chapter 8 from verse 20, moving on to chapter 9. And this is an appropriate shift for two reasons. One is it's an appropriate shift because in verse 4 and 5, there is the affirmation that Jesus is the light of the world, and that while he's here, he is light. So there's a clear tie-in, but it's also a larger application of literal and spiritual blindness. And so both of those are being talked about. And so there's we're invited to this great discussion of this man can't see and Jesus opens his eyes. And as he's able to see, and as he gives a testimony to who Jesus Christ is, the Pharisees, who actually have physical sight, are the ones who are spiritually blind. So good discussion there for us as well. There's a question, what would be question 4 is a good question for us to discuss. And I'd like to add to that, what's the distinction, or when does unbelief turn into refusal to believe? And how can we assess that? I think that's a good discussion there about when is it we just are unaware, and when does it become we've seen enough and yet we still choose to not believe? And the last question, the questions overall are pretty good this week for our discussion. So there's great stuff in this chapter. I hope your group is doing well with this new study. Remember, the overarching context is that our theme for Lent is that we are trying to deepen our relationship with Jesus by diving deeper into who he reveals himself to be, that we oftentimes curtail and have a partial understanding of who he is in fullness. And the I am statements are a great means for us to discover that. Jesus is the light of the world, and those who follow will not be in darkness, but will have the light of life. Take care, and God bless.